I'd like to welcome everyone to the Board of Education Finance Committee meeting for Monday, October 27th, 2025. We've called this meeting to order. Do we have any public comment tonight? Seeing no one here, I assume we do not. Moving on to item number 3, approval of the minutes for July 14th, 2025. Does anyone have any adjustments or corrections at this time? Did you receive any ahead of time, Bonnie? No. All right. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for July 14th, 2025. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, our minutes pass. Moving on, item number 4, discussion and consideration. We have the proposed 2025 draft levy receivable in 2026 and the 10-year financial projections. Mr. Latham?
Thank you, and hello, Finance Committee. So tonight, this is our draft. It's just the first process in our 2025 tax year levy, which is received in 2026. And so I'll go through the traditional levy presentation. So some of the key components are the equal assessed valuation, or the value of someone's home or property. And we'll have a little conversation about our new property tonight as it compares to the previous year. We must follow the property tax extension limitation law, which is a law that we'll have on one of our slides that basically provides a cap for the district and what we can levy. We'll talk about the consumer price index, which is also a cap that we have to follow under PTEL. Tax rates, our max rates, our total extension, our revenue recapture, which is essentially when we have something that appeals at one of the boards and they have to reassess our taxes, we receive a little bit of revenue recapture. And then our truth in taxation, which is a hearing that we'll have in December. So our EAV is essentially the evaluation after the county and state applies equalization factors to that. And our EAV is important because EAV represents growth in the district, or value of homes or property, and also reflects the financial health of the district. The total EAV is multiplied by the approved tax rate per $100 EAV to arrive at the extension. So here's a little bit about the rate setting EAV. So I gave you the levy year that you can see a 10-year progression from 2024 to 2025. And keep in mind that's estimated. So the number I get isn't quite final yet. And then the rate setting EAV. And keep in mind there's some factors, right? So in a typical year, as the EAV increases, the typical rate setting EAV will start to draw down. It's also impacted by CPI or PTEL. And so some of the years have a lot of variance in those in the far right column of the change over the prior year. But as you can see, our rate setting growth now has reached over the 2 billion point in our valuation. And it just continues to show the growth of value in the community.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
There seems to be a stepwise jump from, let's call it 2022, no, 2023 to the last 3 years. I mean, you're running 2 to 3% previously, maybe 4, and all of a sudden now we're 7, 9, 11. Any indication what's driving the change in the EAV at that point?
I think there's a couple factors. One of them that comes to mind is when I usually do the levy and I put in there like what a typical average median home cost is. It used to be in the 300,000s. The most recent one was 5 1/4. Really? So that's quite a bit of jump. So that just shows demand for properties and value in the district. The other part of that is the quadrennial year where they come out and do the reassessment. So sometimes that comes out a little higher. And so that could be a factor as well. So those two things I think are really what's made the increase over those years. And it just also, I think, is maybe a third factor is the value of land. So we're kind of a district that has a lot of landlocked areas. We're primarily the city of Geneva, so that kind of escalates when there's little opportunity for new growth or land.
Thank you.
So this is a little bit about the new construction and new property we've had. So we did see some commercial growth, a little bit of industry and residential. And so overall, it was 12.2 million that we've seen in the initial estimation. I did put in the bottom what last year's new construction was. It was about 15.6 million. So we're a little bit down again. So that just kind of comes and goes at any given year with the development that primarily happens within the city of Geneva.
Another question on the commercial. I noticed that there was been an announcement that the electric company that is outside on town, actually near where the new development is going to go, they're doing a significant increase, expansion there. Is that within our district?
I'm not sure. I had to look at the map and see where that falls into it. I'm not aware of that, but I definitely can look into it because I get more of the city information sent to me. I don't always get the county. If it's in the county, I'll have to go research that and come back.
Okay.
Be nice if it was.
Are you saying a new what? A new?
Is it Erickson Electric? No, what's the electric? I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of it, but there's a out
Oh,
on
yes, that expansion.
yes, and
Yes, I
that
know
was
what you're
announced
talking
on the
about.
paper. And
That is within our boundaries.
it is. Okay.
Yes.
So that'll be in the future. then.
Richardson.
Yes.
Richardson.
Richardson.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, that is. If you'd said that, I know where that's at. I drive by
Yeah,
every day on the way to work.
names are not good.
I was thinking like some kind of new electrical substation for the grid or ComEd. Okay, so that's the difference, 12.2 versus last year, 15.6. And keep in mind too that new property is not subject to PTEL, so we can, a lot of times we'll levy at a higher rate to capture all the dollars we can in new construction, which could be a strategy for this year. So this is the PTEL law. So essentially it's designed to limit property taxes and the extensions for taxes of a district, commonly called the tax cap, and we use that phrase sometimes as misleading. It's not a cap, but it's actually what's placed on the individual bill. So there's some restraints from year to year, so it doesn't escalate at a higher rate. PTEL allows a taxing district to receive a limited inflationary cost in the extension on property. So the increase of the property tax extension is the existing property limit of lesser than 5% or CPI. And just a reminder, the limitation does not apply to the new property tax, as I mentioned before. And again, the 5% is the top that we can get. Anything below that is usually controlled by CPI. So here's the consumer price index for PTEL for the last 10 years. And you can see we hit a high point in the 2021 levy year of 7%, and it's considerably down to 6.5, 3.4, and 2.9. And just this month, we've seen the actual CPI for this year change a little bit as well. So this is what we follow. So when we're looking at levying, we're going to be at that 2.9% is what we're looking at as our cap, because that is the cap for CPI that's set by the county.
And it's always in arrears, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So the best way to tell you which funds are not capped are just to go to the bottom, and everything's capped except bonds and interest, working cash, and our revenue recapture. So this is how we calculate the limiting rate. It's essentially the prior extension times 1 plus the lesser of 5% or CPI divided by the total EAV minus the new property. So my notes are on the bottom that the limiting rate is based on the prior year tax extension, that new property is outside the tax cap, and lastly, our debt service payments are also outside the tax cap. I do that by hand, but I also use a spreadsheet to make it quicker. So times have changed. All right, this is our limiting rate history for the tax year. And so I'll give you the 10-year tax year in the left column. The second from the left is our total tax rate, so that's actually what comes at the bottom of the levy. And then to the right farther is the capped and then the non-capped amount. So as you can see, we started in 2014 at 6.58%, and now here we're looking at 2024 down to 5.374%. So that kind of follows the theory that as EAV goes up, the total tax rate goes down. It's what we call the scales of justice. So that's where we're looking at. So as we keep seeing the EAV and the value overall in the county, now we're over that 2 billion point. That is, as long as it keeps growing, we've had a couple of reset years. You don't see all the way back in 2007, 2008, 2009, but you can see where we've steadily had our total rate drawn down.
As the reduction on, if you go to on the non-capped from year 23 to 24, does that have to do with the fact that some of our bonds were paid off?
Yes, that is reflective of the reduction of our debt.
Okay.
And this is the historical levy request. So what I've showed you over the 10-year period of time is the request and that what we actually received. So, you know, the goal is always to be as close as possible. It will never be exact, but overall, you can see that we're really good about our request to what we actually get. And part of that is taking our time, doing our research, looking at all the factors, and coming back with the best possible levy that we have. So everything's fairly close, so I think we're pretty good in the levy process and working with the board and the finance committee to get those approved. Okay, everybody good? I'll move on. And then this is our 2025 tax levy assumptions. So that CPI is factored at the end of December of 2024, 2.9%. And the most that we can ask is 5%, but it will revert back to the CPI. I placed the estimated EAV of $2,139,835,080. Our EAV increase over the prior year is 9.61%. Our new construction is $12,204,693. The estimation right now is remember this is in its rough form, is a cap levy at 3.9%. We see very little increase in our bond and interest. It's relatively flat. And our estimated tax receipts based upon this assumption and this draft levy is $108,142,811, which represents a $3,233,514 increase over the prior year. So this is what the sheet looks like that I used to put in all of our assumptions. And the information I gave you is off the sheet. The new construction's at the top. The far right under truth and taxation says 3.9. No truth and taxation needed, but we do it anyway out of transparency. And then you have the bond and interest here on the bottom. It's very close to last year. Last year's bond interest was $14,599,427. Estimated this year at $14,598,161. That's why I say there's really no change in our bond for this particular last year to this year. And then at the very bottom is the $108 million that I referenced and the 3.35%. So we'll talk a little bit more about why that might change in the next couple slides. So just a little bit about the hearing. We'll have that come up in December. We publish a notice. We allow members of the public to give testimony. The board provides an opportunity to hear that testimony and also give their own input. And then I'm required by law to give you the cash reserve balances of all funds. Those will be unaudited because our audit's not complete, but they're an estimation. So these are some potential changes. As you know, we have some capital projects that we put out for bid. Those bids have been opened. We also have ongoing projects that will have possibly a chance of a change order or change in funding. We do have working agreements that will come up for pay and health purposes that may impact this. There's always the economy, inflation, global factors, changes in local, state, and federal funding. And then lastly, probably the two biggest pieces are decisions that we make as we finalize a CAP plan and technology plan. So just last week I got the rough numbers on the tech plan. I'll have to make that adjustment in the levy. So I do a couple things. So keep in mind that when the taxes come in, it covers the end of this fiscal year. I receive those in May and June. And then I estimate what next year taxes look like, or next year's budget look like. The taxes for that will come in typically July through the end of October. And then I have to forecast next year without knowing what the numbers really would be. So there's always this process. So this is the Public Act 102-895 disclosure of cash reserve balances. So these are the fund balances as of 6/30/2025 that are unaudited. So we look at all of our funds, Fund 10 through 90. The estimation of the fund balance unaudited is $63,144,734. So the next action that we'll take is I'll come back next month with some more adjusted numbers as we have a chance to go through some of those things and compile more data and try to get some final numbers from the county. But ultimately our goal is to publish that hearing, have the truth and taxation. We'll hold that on December 15th. We'll also review our certificate of levy at that time, which essentially is the numbers by fund that I must turn into the county. We'll have our tax resolution for you at that meeting as well. And then once adopted and approved, I'll file those documents with King County. Okay, so that is the end of my presentation for the draft levy.
Thank you. Paul, any other questions on this part?
No.
Okay. Yeah, you caught some of the ones that I was going to ask too, so I'm glad. And sometimes it's just so everybody who's watching can understand too what some of these numbers are after we crunch through them. All All right, we can move on to the next part of your presentation. 5-year projections.
Yeah, so it's really a 10-year. So,
10-year projections.
But the 5 years what I project out. So we use the existing 3 that are audited in fiscal year 22, 23, and 24 as our baseline, and then we have 2025, which we projected it out from last year. Then we budgeted it. We will still wait for the final audit before I can kind of come back and correct these numbers. I did this a little later last year. I think I was here more like February for this, but based upon the forecast, I thought it was best to come at this period of time as we talk about levy and some future needs. And then I project the budget for 2026, and then what we actually plan to budget. That's where I forecast out. But then I project 2027, 2028, 2029, 2030, and 2031. So this is an exercise that kind of sort of under this particular board where we have to do this process. So I'll just highlight some of those things for you. When we look at local resources, you can see that we've had pretty steady growth, and that is because we're a Tier 4 school relying upon mostly local taxation. We also have local fees and some other contributions to our local sources. Looking over the 10-year period of time, we've seen about a 38% growth overall in the local sources. When we look at our state resources, those are essentially our evidence-based funding and some other categorical reimbursements from the state. We've seen only about a 7% growth in that over the 10 years. When we look at our federal resources, it's very difficult to figure out what that is if you look at 2022 because it's skewed because that is a COVID amount that we received. And if you were to factor that, it'd be about to now would be about a negative 67%. It's really not that bad, but we have seen a further decline. So if you look back in 2023 and you look at a little over $3 million received from federal sources, which is essentially our grants, we forecast my fiscal year 2031 will be at $2.2 million, so almost $800,000 less. Our salary under the expenditures category has seen an increase of about 43% over the 10 years as we forecast that out. Our benefits are a higher number. Those will cost us about 52% over that time. And as you know, we've seen some very costly years in health insurance. A lot of those were through the COVID years that we had to absorb those costs. Our purchase services are forecasted out over the 10 year to be up 54%. Some of those were a lot of the things I bring back to are, the people that we do business with that provide those professional services also passed on a cost to us. Our supply of materials, though, has been relatively kind of up and down in some years, but only about a 15% increase. The biggest one has been our capital outlay, and so when we look at that at our capital projects over the 10 years, we've seen, and keep in mind this is not Fund 60, that's other capital projects that we have, about 184% increase over those 10 years. Our other objects come in at about 8% increase. Those are pretty steady because a lot of those are a lot of our tuition. And then our non-capital is up 89%. And those are items that don't fit our capital requirement, but we still purchase every year. So we've seen a large growth of that. Overall, when I looked at the other sources of financing from our $2.9 million in fiscal year 22, we've been very steady at that. And I layered into that category all of our capital projects that are in our 10-year proposed plan. And we see about a 285% increase over the 10 years in the use of other funds. So that means we've relied heavily on our fund balance. Something that we just cannot sustain, and I need the board to look into that further and have a direction that we work on. And so I did plan on this. So when we look at fiscal year 27 of 9.8 other sources, that really is 9.8 of capital needs. 2028, 9.7, that's 9.7 million of capital needs. So I put all that into the equation. So the concern I think that we probably would look at is a beginning fund balance of 2022 of $70,610,000, and when we get to fiscal year 2031 of $29,071,000. So we've used by that point under this 10-year plan almost $50 million of our fund balance if we continue on the path that we're on. Lastly, I'd like to point out that when we look at our fund balance as a percentage of expenditures, and now that's a little different than our board. Our board policy says I keep a reserve of 30% of our revenues. The idea is I use those to offset the expenditures. But in this 10-year plan, I take a little different look. I look at the percentage of expenditures because I also want to know what I would need to cover over time. And we had the fund balance as percent of expenditures at 74%. And by the time we get done with this fiscal year plan in 2031, we'll be down to about 13.47%, which is a tremendous reduction in our fund balance as a percent of our expenditures, which I believe leads us to be exposed, and we don't really want to be in that position with such a low fund balance. And then lastly, I look at the fund balance of a percent of months of expenditures, and we went from 8.95 as something that we reserve to pay off those expenditures down to 1.62 as a fund balance of numbers of months of the expenditures that we would keep on hand. That would be a reduction overall of about 82%. So it has me very concerned when I look at our financial outlook, that the capital plans that we have and the needs that we have for capital just continue to eat at our fund balance. That also diminishes our ability to keep proper reserves, to have that level of comfort, and let alone also have funds that we can invest and get a return on our money. We've been very good about our investments over the last 5 years. I've laddered those out as the business official and locked in a lot of those rates that you see now, the high 5s and 4s that we have out for several years because of the way that we purchased. But I still have a lot of reservations about the sustainability of our spending.
All right, Paul?
Yeah,
Comments?
one question.
Yes.
On your revenue as you go out to, what is it, 2031? Sorry, I can't
Yes.
read it. I'm assuming that there is no impact in here of the Fox, LaFox,
The Campton Hills.
either the upfront payment or the per student charge that will come as people move in.
There is not, because originally it's minimal unless we get a direct impact of students in the district, and then as we know, we get a higher per capita cost. So I have not built that in yet, and I probably would not until we start to see, because a couple things take place, right? So they build the homes and it doesn't come on the tax till the next year. So it really depends if those homes are being built and when those will come out. So we could have a much better picture at some point in time. I didn't want to make that assumption at this
No,
point.
I understand, but I mean, it's an upside
Mhm.
of something we probably should at least consider as we look at out years.
Yeah, I mean, one model I could use would be the estimated number of homes to be built by the developer, and I could take what would be the average home and figure out the AV and build it into the model. I'm not saying I was lazy. I'm just.
No, I'm not. I'm just.
No, I'm just saying I'm reserved. I'd like to come back, and I think it's probably a good point that you make that maybe we do come back. We start to see when it's more eminent that those homes will be built. I know they have quite a bit of work still to do.
Right.
It's not shoveling the ground yet, and I think when we do, then I think that's a good point. We could see some different numbers. But keep in mind, too, that although we'll have that revenue, we'll still have the expenses to some extent, but it could be a better financial picture for us.
Right.
All right, thank you. I don't have any further questions. I appreciate you taking the time to forecast this out and start having us think about certain things that we have in our future plans. Thanks.
Yeah, I would just add thanks to Todd for this, and I know we have a retreat coming up in a couple weeks that's gonna maybe give us an opportunity to, as a board, to dig deeper into a couple of these things Todd highlighted for us today. So, I'm glad we can do that. Thanks, Todd.
You're welcome.
All right, moving on. Item number 5, future agenda items. We don't have anything there. Item number 6 is items for recommendation to the full board. We have the proposed 2025 draft levy receivable in 2026. Do I have a motion to move that on to the full board?
So moved.
Second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Same sign. All right, we'll move that on to the full board. Item number 7 is information. I don't have any legislative update for us here today. Dr. Barrett, anything?
Nope, nothing today.
Okay, great.
Veto session, I think they pick back up tomorrow officially for
Yeah.
the second veto session, so we'll see what happens.
Exactly. All right, so I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
We stand adjourned. Thank you.